A lost child's cry in night leads a weary man to a shocking truth in her tearful eyes. He sees the face of his own daughter. The city was alive with sounds that carried unevenly through night. The distant hum of traffic mixed with the occasional shout and the echo of footsteps on wet pavement as he walked alone, thinking of nothing and everything at once. His coat was pulled tight around his shoulders and chill bit at his skin, yet he barely noticed as his mind wandered through memories and half-forgotten dreams. He had walked these streets countless times before, and yet tonight there was a weight that pressed on him as if city itself sensed something was about to change. Then he heard a small plaintive cry that seemed to float above the noise and yet pierce through it with startling clarity. His steps faltered and he paused, listening intently. The cry came again, softer time, trembling and fragile like a leaf caught in the wind. It drew him toward an alley, narrow and shadowed, a place he would have ordinarily passed without a thought. His heart pulled him forward instinctively, and with cautious steps he approached Source, peering into darkness and uncertainty. There she was, a child no more 5 or 6, sitting on cold ground, knees pulled to her chest, tiny shoulders shaking with sobs. Her face was hidden in her hands, yet the sound of her crying was enough to make his chest tighten. He knelt slowly, keeping his distance, at first unsure how she would react to a stranger in night, yet something in the rawness of her fear and the loneliness in way she trembled compelled him to speak. He offered gentle words, soft and slow. When she did not respond, he shifted his weight closer, letting his presence be calm and steady. His hands rested lightly on his knees, a bridge not thread, and slowly child peeked up, her wide eyes filled with tears and uncertainty. He smiled faintly, a quiet encouragement, and whispered again, not demanding but inviting her trust that she was not alone. The city seemed to pause around them, the noise fading into background as if it understood the significance of the moment. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and yet no one came. Remained empty and still. His heart began to recognize vulnerability in her eyes, way she sought comfort without words, and something deep inside him stirred, feeling he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Instinct to protect, to hold and soothe rose steadily, and he realized that he would not turn away from this small life, no matter how fleeting the encounter might seem. He stayed with her, keeping words low and movement slow, offering warmth in presence and voice, and as night pressed on, the child gradually relaxed, leaning slightly toward him, sensing safety without fully understanding. The child's small hand slipped into his as they moved through the quiet streets together, her grip tentative at first, yet growing steadier with each step. He walked slowly, careful not to startle her, yet allowing her the space to feel that she had a choice in following him. They passed shuttered shops and dimly lit corners, and the city felt different, somehow less harsh, more intimate with her presence beside him. Her sobs had subsided into quiet hiccups and the occasional sniffle, and he found himself speaking softly, telling her things that mattered little yet somehow seemed to matter to her. She listened with wide eyes, and when she spoke her words were hesitant but earnest, and each one became a bridge connecting them across the distance of years and loss. As they walked, he noticed the way she tilted her head when she was curious, the way her small fingers brushed against objects, and the subtle expressions that mirrored a familiarity he could not immediately place. The way she laughed quietly at something simple brought warmth to his chest and reminded him of echoes of someone he once loved, someone who had been lost, and yet here in this child he glimpsed traces of what had been, and the thought unsettled him with longing and a flicker of hope. They found a small park where the swings swayed gently in the night breeze, and he encouraged her to sit. He watched her carefully, noticing how she hesitated at first and then allowed herself to be carried by the motion, letting out small peals of laughter that seemed to wash over the tension that had followed them. The city lights above cast long shadows and illuminated her face in ways that made him catch his breath, a mixture of innocence, curiosity and resilience that felt impossibly familiar. With each passing moment he began to sense that this was more than coincidence, that this child's presence was stirring memories and emotions he had long tried to suppress. The way she responded to his touch, the trust in her eyes, and the way she sought comfort without demanding it, all began to form a pattern that tugged at the edges of his mind, forcing him to confront questions he had avoided for years, questions about the past, about love lost, and about what had become of what he once held dear. By the time they found a quiet bench under a street lamp, he realized that the child had already begun to teach him patience and presence. The city noise seemed distant now, replaced by the subtle rhythm of their shared breathing and the gentle connection growing between them. He spoke her name softly as she leaned into him, and he understood that in these small interactions the foundation of something profound was being laid. A bond had formed, fragile yet undeniable, and he sensed that in her he had found both a reflection of his past and a promise of what might still be possible. The days that followed unfolded with a rhythm that was both exhausting and comforting. He took the child with him through his routines, showing her small corners of his world, the quiet spaces he had claimed for himself, the hidden benches in parks and the little cafes where the owners remembered him. With a nod and smile she followed with curiosity and caution, absorbing everything with wide eyes and tentative movements. Each day they spent together deepened the bond that had begun in the alley, and he found himself noticing details about her that stirred memories long buried: her laugh, the tilt of her head when she was thinking, the way her hands fidgeted when she was nervous. He began to anticipate her needs before she spoke, offering comfort and guidance without demand, and in return she began to open up more, trusting him with small stories of her own life, the loneliness she had endured, the nights she had spent waiting and hoping. She listened to him as well, asking questions about the past, about people he once knew and places he had loved, and in their exchange a fragile intimacy began to grow, one built on trust and mutual recognition of each other's vulnerabilities. The city itself seemed to shift around them. The crowded streets became less threatening, the night less lonely, and even the mundane routines took on a new significance. He found himself arranging his days to spend more time with her to ensure she felt safe and seen, and in doing so he discovered a sense of purpose that had been absent for years. It was not a love he understood fully yet, but a profound care that demanded attention and presence, and in it he felt alive in ways he had forgotten. As they shared meals, walked in parks, and lingered under quiet street lamps, he began to notice subtle clues that tugged at his memory. A phrase she used, a gesture she repeated, and the way her eyes lit up in certain moments. It was as if fragments of a past he had buried were surfacing through her, and he could not ignore the possibility that she was connected to him in ways he had not yet allowed himself to consider. Each day brought more questions and more hope, mingled with the fear of discovering a truth that might overwhelm him. By the time night fell and they sat together on a bench looking at the stars peeking between city buildings, he realized that their bond had transformed the ordinary into something extraordinary. He was no longer simply protecting a child, he had found someone who reflected pieces of himself and of a past he thought he had lost forever. The presence of the child had begun to rewrite his days and reshape his heart, and he sensed that the path ahead would demand courage, honesty, and perhaps a confrontation with the truth that had been waiting patiently for him to notice. The realization came slowly, at first a quiet whisper at the edge of his mind that grew louder with each shared glance, each small gesture, each word exchanged. The child's expressions, the familiar way she held herself, the subtle cadence in her voice, all began to awaken memories he had long thought buried, memories of a woman he had loved, a life he had lost, and a child he had never expected to see again. At first he resisted the thought, telling himself it was coincidence or imagination, yet the more he observed her the harder it became to deny the truth. He found himself replaying moments in his mind, the way she laughed, the way she flinched when startled, the way she sought comfort and protection, and gradually he began to see patterns only a father could recognize. The city around them faded into background, leaving only the clarity of connection and the rush of emotions he had spent years suppressing. Fear, guilt, longing, and hope mingled in a turbulent current inside him as he realized what he had thought impossible might be true. He began to test the signs cautiously, speaking of things only someone familiar with the past would understand, observing her reactions and waiting for that spark of recognition in her eyes. Each small confirmation intensified the whirlwind of emotions inside him, and the stakes grew higher because acknowledging the truth meant confronting a lifetime of absence and mistakes. He felt the weight of every lost moment and the urgency to reclaim the time that could never be returned. When the final confirmation came, perhaps in a photograph she carried, or a lullaby she hummed, or a phrase she repeated, it struck him like lightning and left him breathless. The child was his daughter, the child he had lost or believed lost, the living echo of a life he had once held close and now saw standing in front of him. He felt the full force of longing, guilt, and protective instinct crash over him in a wave that left him shaken yet resolute. In that moment all hesitation fell away, and he reached for her arms, not as a stranger, not as a man uncertain of his place, but as a father reclaiming what had always belonged to him. His voice broke as he whispered words of reassurance and love, and she responded with trust that had been quietly growing all along. The city lights around them seemed to soften, and the night itself held its breath as the truth of their connection solidified in the silent understanding between them. He saw her face fully for the first time, not just as a child he had rescued, but as his daughter, and the weight of absence dissolved into the promise of reunion. The reunion carried a weight that neither of them could have anticipated, yet in its quiet intensity there was also a sense of release and possibility. He held her close, feeling the smallness of her body against his own and the warmth of her trust like a balm to years of guilt and longing. She looked up at him with wide eyes and tentative recognition, and in that gaze he saw both the past and the future mirrored in a single instant. The city around them faded once more as he led her to a place where they could be alone, a small apartment or a quiet corner of a familiar park, somewhere safe and steady where the world's chaos could not intrude. He spoke softly, filling the silence with words of love and apology, and she listened, absorbing each one in her own quiet way, as if measuring the truth in his tone and presence. Their connection deepened with every shared glance and gentle touch until it felt unbreakable. In the days that followed he learned the rhythm of her life, the fears she carried and the small joys she treasured. He attended to her needs without hesitation, guided her gently into routines that offered safety and predictability, and watched with quiet awe as her confidence and trust blossomed with each passing day. The walls they had both built around themselves began to crumble, leaving only honesty, vulnerability, and the beginnings of a renewed family bond. He reflected on the years lost and the choices that had kept them apart, and while regret lingered he refused to let it define them. Instead he focused on building new memories, each small moment a brick in the foundation of their relationship. Each shared meal, each bedtime story, each walk through the city streets became part of a tapestry of reconnection stitched with patience, understanding and unwavering care. By the time evening fell and they sat together under a quiet street lamp or on a bench watching the stars peek between the buildings, he realized that the life he had feared lost forever had been restored in a way more profound than he had imagined. She was not just a child in need of rescue, but his daughter, a living embodiment of love, hope and the possibility of second chances. Their future was not without challenge, but it was theirs to shape together, and in that knowledge he found peace, fulfillment and the quiet certainty that they had both been found at last.